I arrived at Ashford Academy at 2:45 on a Tuesday afternoon, 15 minutes early for Oliver's dentist appointment. The parking lot was nearly empty. Most parents wouldn't arrive for another hour. I grabbed my purse from the passenger seat and walked through the main entrance, my heels clicking against the polished marble floors that had cost the school board $300,000 to install last year. The administrative office was on my right, but I headed straight for Oliver's classroom down the east corridor. Mrs. Patterson usually had the second graders finish their afternoon reading by 2:30, so Oliver should be ready. I was mentally reviewing my schedule for the rest of the week when I heard it. A small, muffled sound coming from somewhere ahead. I stopped walking and listened. Crying. A child crying, trying very hard not to be heard. My mother's instinct kicked in immediately. I followed the sound down the secondary hallway, past the art room and the music studio. The crying got louder, more distinct. I recognized that particular pattern of sobs even before I saw him. 7 years of being Oliver's mother had trained my ears to know every variation of his cry. This wasn't frustration or disappointment, this was heartbreak. I turned the corner and found him. My 7-year-old son was crouched behind the large recycling bin, his knees pulled up to his chest, his face buried in his arms. His small body shook with sobs he was desperately trying to control. The blue polo shirt from his school uniform was wrinkled and damp with tears. His brown hair, the same shade as mine before I went gray, stuck to his forehead with sweat. Everything inside me went cold and hot at the same time. "Oliver," I said softly, dropping to my knees beside him without caring that my white Chanel suit would be ruined on the linoleum floor. "Baby, what happened?" He looked up at me with eyes so full of pain that I felt my heart actually stop beating for a second. Those green eyes, the exact shade of my own, were red and swollen. His face was blotchy, tear-stained, completely devastated in a way no 7-year-old should ever look. "Mommy," he whispered, and his voice broke on the word. I reached out and pulled him into my arms. He came willingly, burying his face against my shoulder and sobbing harder now that he didn't have to hide it anymore. I held him tight, one hand rubbing circles on his back the way I'd done since he was a baby, the other cradling his head against me. "It's okay, sweetheart. I'm here. I've got you." I kept my voice calm and steady, even though panic was screaming through every nerve in my body. "Tell Mommy what happened. Who made you cry like this?" He pulled back just enough to look at me, and I used my thumbs to wipe the tears from his cheeks. His bottom lip trembled, and fresh tears spilled over. "Oliver, honey, you can tell me anything. You know that, right? No matter what it is, Mommy will fix it." He took a shaky breath, then another. When he finally spoke, his words came out in a broken rush that destroyed me. "Daddy and Sienna said I ruined their life. They said I shouldn't have been born." The world stopped. I heard the words. I understood each one individually. But together, strung into that sentence coming from my baby's mouth, they didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. "What?" My voice came out as a whisper. "What did you say?" "Last night at Daddy's apartment," Oliver said, more tears streaming down his face. "I was supposed to be asleep, but I got thirsty and I went to get water and they were in the living room and Sienna was crying and she said she can't do this anymore. And Daddy said what? And she said this. Having a kid around all the time, she wants to travel and do fun things and I ruin everything. And then Daddy said..." He stopped, his whole body shaking. "Daddy said he knows and that sometimes he wishes I was never born so he could have a different life." My hands started trembling. I had to physically force myself to keep breathing, to stay present for Oliver, instead of losing myself to the rage that was building inside me like a tsunami. "Are you absolutely sure that's what they said?" I asked, still hoping somehow there was a misunderstanding, even though I knew there wasn't. "Those exact words?" Oliver nodded miserably. Sienna saw me then, and she got really mad and told me to go back to bed, and that if I told you they'd say I was lying and making up stories to get Daddy in trouble. She said you'd be mad at me for causing problems. The trembling in my hands spread to my whole body, not from fear, from an anger so pure and focused that it felt like electricity in my veins. I had spent 2 years being the civilized ex-wife, 2 years maintaining cordial communication with Marcus for Oliver's sake, 2 years ignoring my instincts when they told me something was wrong because I didn't want to be the bitter divorcee using her child as a weapon. 2 years watching my happy, bright boy slowly become anxious and withdrawn before visits with his father, and I'd told myself he just needed time to adjust. I had failed my son by being too reasonable. That ended right now. I cupped Oliver's face in my hands and looked directly into his eyes. Listen to me very carefully, sweetheart. None of this is your fault, not one single bit. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me. You are smart and kind and funny and creative, and I thank God every single day that you were born. Do you understand me? But Daddy said, I don't care what Daddy said. He's wrong, and Sienna is wrong, and they are both going to learn exactly how wrong they are. I wiped his tears again and kissed his forehead. Dry your eyes, my love. We're going to fix this, today, right now. Your father is going to regret every single word he said to you. Oliver's eyes widened. What are you going to do? I'm going to protect you, I said simply. The way I should have been doing all along. But first, we need to talk to someone. Someone who can help us make sure Daddy never hurts you like this again. Would that be okay? He nodded slowly, then wrapped his arms around my neck and hugged me tight. I love you, Mommy. I love you more than anything in this entire world, I whispered against his hair. And I promise you, baby, I promise you this stops today. I stood up, helping Oliver to his feet. My white suit was wrinkled and dusty, my knees probably bruised, my carefully styled hair coming loose from its clip. I didn't care about any of it. I took my phone from my purse and dialed Patricia Langford's direct line. She answered on the second ring. Vivian? I thought you had Oliver's dentist appointment this afternoon. Cancel everything on your calendar for the rest of the day, I said, my voice steady and cold. I need you to file an emergency petition for sole custody. Today, right now. There was a pause. Patricia had been my best friend for 23 years and my divorce attorney 2 years ago. She knew me well enough to know I didn't say things like this lightly. What happened? She asked, her lawyer voice clicking into place. Marcus told our 7-year-old son that he wishes he was never born, in front of his girlfriend. Oliver heard the whole thing. I have him with me now and he's devastated. Jesus Christ, Patricia breathed. Where are you? At the school. I'm taking Oliver to see Dr. Morrison for an emergency session right now. Can you meet us there in an hour with whatever paperwork we need to start this process? I'll be there in 45 minutes, Patricia said. Vivian, I've been telling you for 6 months that something wasn't right with those visits. I know, I said quietly, looking down at Oliver's tear-stained face. I know you were right. I should have listened. I won't make that mistake again. We'll fix this, Patricia said firmly. I'll see you soon. I hung up and crouched down to Oliver's level again. We're going to go see Dr. Morrison now instead of the dentist. She's a very nice lady who helps kids talk about their feelings when something hard happens. Is that okay with you? Will I have to talk about what Daddy said? Only if you want to, I assured him. But it might help. And it will definitely help me make sure you don't have to hear things like that anymore. Oliver considered this, then nodded. Okay. We walked back through the corridors toward the main entrance. As we passed the administrative office, I stuck my head in. Margaret Chen, the academy's director, looked up from her desk. Mrs. Hartwell, is everything all right? I saw you arrive, but... She stopped when she saw Oliver's face, and her expression shifted immediately to concern. Oliver, sweetheart, are you okay? We're leaving early today, I said. There's a family situation that needs immediate attention. I'll call you later to discuss it. Margaret's eyes moved between Oliver and me, and I saw the exact moment she shifted into professional mode. She'd been director of Ashford Academy for 12 years. She knew what upset children looked like, and she knew how to read the signs. "Of course," she said carefully. "Please do call me. And Oliver, you take care of yourself." Oliver managed a small wave, and we continued outside to my car. The drive to Dr. Ellen Morrison's office normally took 20 minutes, but I made it in 14. Oliver sat quietly in the back seat, staring out the window. I kept glancing at him in the rearview mirror, watching his small face for any sign of what he was feeling. He looked numb now, the tears dried on his cheeks, his eyes distant. I had met Dr. Morrison at a charity fundraiser 8 months ago. She was a child psychologist specializing in family trauma, and we'd had a long conversation about her work. I'd liked her immediately. She was warm but direct, compassionate but practical. When Oliver started having nightmares 3 months ago, I'd considered making an appointment, but talked myself out of it. Told myself it was normal childhood anxiety, that he'd adjust to the new custody arrangement eventually. I should have brought him to her months ago. I pulled into the parking lot of the medical building where Dr. Morrison's practice was located and called her office from the car. "Dr. Morrison's office, this is Rachel speaking. This is Vivian Hartwell. I met Dr. Morrison at the Children's Hospital fundraiser last spring. I need an emergency appointment for my 7-year-old son, right now, if possible. It's urgent." "Let me check with Dr. Morrison," Rachel said. I heard muffled conversation, then she came back on the line. "She has a patient until 3:30, but she's willing to stay late for you. Can you be here by 3:45? I checked my watch. 3:20 now. "We're already in your parking lot. We'll wait." "I'll let her know. Come on up to the office." I got Oliver out of the car and we took the elevator to the 3rd floor. The waiting room was painted in soft blues and greens, with comfortable chairs and a play area filled with books and quiet toys. Oliver sat next to me, holding my hand tightly. At 3:30 exactly, a door opened and a woman in her early 40s with kind eyes and graying blonde hair stepped out with a young girl about Oliver's age. She said something to the child's mother, smiled at the girl, then turned to us. "Mrs. Hartwell, I'm Dr. Morrison. Why don't you and Oliver come back to my office?" Her office was warm and inviting, decorated with children's artwork and shelves of books and toys. There was a large, comfortable couch, several beanbag chairs, and a desk pushed discreetly into the corner. "Oliver, I'm very glad to meet you," Dr. Morrison said, kneeling down to his level. "Your mom says you've had a really hard day. Would it be okay if we talked about it?" Oliver looked at me. I squeezed his hand. "It's okay, sweetheart. Dr. Morrison is here to help." "Would you like your mom to stay with you, or would you prefer to talk to me alone for a bit?" Dr. Morrison asked. "There's no wrong answer. Whatever feels most comfortable for you." "I want Mommy to stay," Oliver said quietly. "That's perfectly fine," Dr. Morrison said. She gestured to the couch, and we all sat down. "So, Oliver, can you tell me what happened today that made you so upset?" And my son, my brave, sensitive, heartbroken boy, told her everything. The same story he'd told me, but with more details this time. How Sienna had been complaining for weeks about having to deal with a kid every other weekend. How Marcus had started sighing heavily whenever Oliver asked to do something together. How last Tuesday, Marcus had snapped at him for spilling juice and said Oliver ruined everything he touched, just like he ruined the marriage. I sat there listening, my nails digging into my palms, forcing myself to stay calm for Oliver's sake, while fury built inside me like a pressure cooker. "Doctor," Morrison asked gentle questions, never pushing, always giving Oliver space to answer in his own time. She was remarkable with him, and I watched my son slowly relax as he talked, the words coming easier now that someone was truly listening. The session lasted an hour and 15 minutes. When it was over, Dr. Morrison asked to speak with me privately for a moment. Oliver went to the waiting room with Rachel while Dr. Morrison and I stayed in her office. Mrs. Hartwell, what your son described is consistent with ongoing emotional abuse, she said without preamble. The statements made by his father and his father's partner constitute psychological harm. The pattern of behavior Oliver described, the escalation over several months, the impact on his emotional well-being, these are all serious concerns that need to be addressed immediately. I'm filing for emergency custody today, I said. My attorney is meeting me here in... I checked my watch. 10 minutes. Good, Dr. Morrison said. I'll prepare a detailed report of today's session. Oliver will need ongoing therapy to process this trauma, and I'd like to see him twice a week initially. I'll also recommend supervised visitation only for his father until he completes a psychological evaluation and parenting classes. Thank you, I said, my voice thick. I should have brought him to you months ago. I saw the signs, but I didn't want to believe. Parents often struggle to accept when someone they once trusted is harming their child, Dr. Morrison said kindly. What matters is that you're taking action now. You're protecting him. That's what he needs from you. Patricia arrived exactly when she said she would, briefcase in hand, already in full lawyer mode. She hugged me briefly, ruffled Oliver's hair gently, then pulled Dr. Morrison aside to discuss the documentation we'd need. I sat with Oliver in the waiting room, holding his hand, watching him color in a dinosaur coloring book that Rachel had given him. He seemed calmer now, less devastated and more tired. "Mommy?" he said quietly, not looking up from his coloring. "Yes, baby?" "Are you mad at me?" I set down the magazine I'd been pretending to read and pulled him into my lap, even though he was really getting too big for it. "I am not mad at you. I could never be mad at you for something like this. I'm mad at Daddy for saying terrible things that aren't true. But you? You did absolutely nothing wrong. You understand that, right?" He nodded against my shoulder. "Sienna said you'd think I was lying." "Sienna is wrong about a lot of things," I said firmly. "I believe you completely. And I'm going to make sure you're safe and protected, I promise." Patricia emerged from Dr. Morrison's office with a folder of documents. "Vivian, we need to go file these at the courthouse before they close at 5. Can Oliver wait with my assistant at my office? It's just 2 blocks from here." I looked at Oliver. "Would you be okay hanging out at Aunt Patricia's office for a little while? Her assistant Amanda has a son your age, and I think she keeps toys there." Oliver nodded. "Okay." We drove to Patricia's law office and got Oliver settled in the small conference room with Amanda, who produced an iPad loaded with educational games and a bag of goldfish crackers. Then Patricia and I got back in my car and headed to the courthouse. I pulled every case file I could find on emergency custody petitions involving emotional abuse, Patricia said as I drove. Connecticut family courts take this seriously, especially when documented by a licensed psychologist. Dr. Morrison's report gives us strong grounds for temporary full custody pending a formal hearing. "What about Marcus?" I asked. "Will they notify him?" "He'll be served with papers tomorrow morning. The emergency petition gets us an immediate temporary order based on Oliver's safety. Marcus can contest it, but he'll have to do it in front of a judge, and Dr. Morrison's testimony is going to be damning." We made it to the courthouse with 20 minutes to spare. Patricia moved through the building like she owned it, filing paperwork, speaking to clerks, getting everything stamped and processed. I stood beside her, still in my wrinkled white suit with dusty knees, and thought about Marcus Hartwell. The man I'd married 22 years ago when I was a junior financial analyst, and he was a charming, ambitious realtor. The man I'd built a company with, created a life with, had a child with. The man who'd cheated on me with a client 15 years younger, then had the audacity to act like I was the unreasonable one when I asked for a divorce. I'd given him everything he asked for in the divorce. Kept it civil, friendly even. Split custody 70-30 so Oliver could have both parents. Never badmouthed him in front of our son. Maintained cordial communication about schedules and school events and medical appointments. And this was what he'd done with my generosity. This was how he'd repaid my civility. He'd broken our child's heart. The trembling in my hands started again, but this time it wasn't from shock or fear. It was from rage, so pure and focused that I could feel it sharpening me like a blade. Patricia touched my arm. "We're done here. Temporary emergency custody order effective immediately. Marcus's visitation is suspended pending psychological evaluation and a formal custody hearing scheduled for 3 weeks from now." 3 weeks, I repeated. "It's fast for family court," Patricia said. "Judge Brennan is taking this seriously because of Oliver's age and Dr. Morrison's involvement. But Vivian, you need to prepare yourself. Marcus is going to fight this. He's going to be angry. This is going to get ugly." I looked at her, and whatever she saw in my face made her take a small step back. "Let it get ugly," I said quietly. "I'm done being nice. I'm done being reasonable. He made my 7-year-old son believe he shouldn't have been born. There is no version of this that doesn't end with Marcus regretting every word he said." Patricia studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right then. Let's destroy him." I met Marcus Hartwell in the spring of 2003 at a real estate investment seminar in Hartford. I was 29 years old, working as a junior financial analyst at Peterson & Associates, wearing my best navy suit that I'd bought on sale at Macy's. He was 34, already making a name for himself selling luxury properties in Fairfield County, confident and charming in a way that made everyone in the room turn to look at him when he spoke. He approached me during the coffee break, introduced himself, and asked intelligent questions about investment portfolios and market trends. By the end of the seminar, he'd asked me to dinner. By the end of that summer, we were inseparable. By December, he'd proposed with a 2-carat diamond ring he'd gotten at a discount from a jeweler client. We got married in June 2004. Small ceremony, 100 guests, honeymoon in Tuscany that Marcus insisted on paying for even though it stretched his budget. I thought it was romantic. Looking back now, I realize it was the first sign of his need to appear more successful than he actually was. The first few years were good. Marcus's real estate business was booming during the mid-2000s housing surge, and I was climbing steadily at Peterson & Associates. We bought a house in Greenwich in 2006, a beautiful colonial with 4 bedrooms that we both loved. We talked about having children, but agreed to wait until we were more established. Then came 2008 and the financial crisis. The real estate market collapsed almost overnight. Marcus went from selling 3 to 4 luxury properties a month to selling maybe 1 every 2 months. His commission income dropped by 70%. I watched him spiral into stress and resentment, especially when my career remained stable. Financial analysis was still needed even in a recession, maybe especially in a recession. That's when I had the idea that changed everything. "We should start our own company," I told Marcus one night in early 2009, sitting at our kitchen table with spreadsheets and business plans spread between us. "You know real estate, I know finance. We could do investment consulting for high-net-worth individuals, help them navigate the recovery market." Marcus loved it immediately. We named it Hartwell Financial Consultants and filed the paperwork in March 2009. We were equal partners, 50-50 ownership. Marcus handled client relationships and real estate investment strategies. I handled the financial analysis, portfolio management, and operational logistics. For the first 2 years, it was a struggle. We worked 70-hour weeks, often late into the night at our home office. But slowly, carefully, we built a client base. Marcus was brilliant at networking, at making people trust him with their money. I was meticulous about delivering results, about making sure every recommendation was sound. Oliver was born in November 2011. I was 37, Marcus was 42. We'd been married 7 years, and the company was finally profitable enough that we could afford to start a family. I took 3 months of maternity leave, then went back to work part-time, pumping breast milk in my office between conference calls. Marcus was thrilled about being a father in theory, less enthusiastic about the reality. He didn't do middle-of-the-night feedings or diaper changes. He traveled constantly for client meetings, often staying overnight in Manhattan or Boston, even when he could have driven home. I told myself it was fine, that he was building our business, that I could handle both motherhood and work. And I could. I did. But it meant I was the one who got up with Oliver when he had nightmares. I was the one who took him to pediatrician appointments and read him bedtime stories and taught him to tie his shoes. Marcus was the fun weekend dad who showed up for the easy parts and disappeared when things got difficult. The company kept growing. By 2015, we had 23 high-net-worth clients and revenue of over $4 million annually. I had hired 2 junior analysts to help with the workload. Marcus had expanded his network across Connecticut and into New York. We were successful by any measure. But our marriage was falling apart, and I was too busy to notice until it was too late. Marcus started traveling more in 2016. 2, sometimes 3 nights a week in Manhattan, staying at expensive hotels, claiming he needed to be available for client dinners and early morning meetings. I believed him because I wanted to believe him, because doubting him meant facing things I wasn't ready to face. Oliver was 5 then, starting kindergarten at Ashford Academy. I was the one who dropped him off every morning and picked him up every afternoon. I was the one who volunteered for the PTA and organized his birthday parties and took him to swimming lessons on Saturdays. Marcus would show up for the big events, soccer games, and school plays, and everyone would comment on what a wonderful father he was. No one saw the reality. No one saw that Oliver barely knew his father, that Marcus could go 3 days without asking about his own son, that when Oliver would excitedly tell Marcus about something that happened at school, Marcus would half listen while checking his phone. I found out about Sienna in January 2023. The discovery was almost pathetically cliché. Marcus left his iPad at home when he went to the office, and a text notification popped up on the screen while I was in the kitchen making breakfast. I glanced at it automatically and saw a message from someone named Sienna with a heart emoji. Missing you already. Last night was amazing. Can't wait for Miami next weekend. My hands had frozen on the coffee pot. Miami. Marcus had told me he was going to a real estate conference in Boston next weekend. I'd picked up the iPad with shaking fingers and opened his messages. 3 years of conversations, 3 years of photos and plans and I love yous with a woman I'd never heard of. 3 years of Marcus living a completely separate life while I raised our son and ran our business. The confrontation that night was brutal. Marcus didn't even try to deny it at first. He was almost relieved to have it out in the open. He sat on our couch, the same couch where we'd planned our business and discussed baby names, and told me he'd fallen in love with someone else. I'm sorry, Vivian, he'd said, and he actually sounded sorry. I never meant for this to happen, but Sienna makes me feel alive again, young, like I have possibilities. You have a wife, I'd said, my voice cold and steady, even though I was dying inside. You have a son. I know, and I'll always care about you. You're an amazing woman, an amazing mother. But we've grown apart. You have to admit that. When was the last time we had a real conversation that wasn't about Oliver or the business? He wasn't wrong about that part. We had grown apart. I just hadn't realized how far. Who is she? I'd asked. A client. She bought a condo in Tribeca through me 3 years ago. We stayed in touch, and one thing led to another. She's 32, works as a lifestyle influencer. She's fun, spontaneous. Everything is easy with her. Everything is easy when you're not responsible for anything, I'd thought. Easy when you're not the one managing the household and raising the child and running the business while your partner plays house with someone who has no real obligations. I'd filed for divorce the next week. Patricia handled everything. I was numb through most of it, functioning on autopilot. Work, Oliver, legal meetings, repeat. I didn't cry much. Crying felt like weakness, and I needed to be strong for Oliver. The divorce negotiations were surprisingly amicable, probably because I made them that way. Marcus wanted to keep the Manhattan apartment he'd bought the year before, supposedly for business purposes, but actually to have somewhere to take Sienna. Fine. I wanted the Greenwich house where Oliver had grown up. Done. He wanted to sell his share of Hartwell Financial Consultants. I offered him $2.3 million, slightly below market value, but still fair. He took it without arguing. For custody, we agreed to 70-30 split with Oliver, primarily with me. Marcus would have every other weekend, alternating holidays, 2 weeks in summer. It seemed reasonable. Marcus claimed he wanted to be involved in Oliver's life, and despite everything, I believed he loved our son in his own limited way. The divorce was finalized in March 2024. I was 52 years old, suddenly single after 19 years of marriage, with a 6-year-old son and a business to run alone. I threw myself into work with an intensity that bordered on obsessive. Without Marcus's charm and networking skills, I had to prove I could maintain client relationships on my own merit. I restructured the entire company, hired a business development manager, expanded our services. Within 6 months, I'd signed 8 new clients and increased revenue by 35%. Marcus, meanwhile, seemed to be floundering. His real estate sales dropped. He was coasting on his reputation, but without the stability of our business income, he was struggling. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd made some bad investment decisions, that he was over-leveraged on properties he couldn't sell. I didn't care. Let him figure out his own life. I had Oliver to focus on. The first year after the divorce, Oliver seemed to adjust relatively well. He missed having both parents in the same house, but he was young enough to adapt. The weekends with Marcus were fine initially. Oliver would come home talking about going to museums or Central Park, about dinners at nice restaurants. But something shifted around last summer. I noticed it slowly at first. Oliver became quieter on Friday afternoons before Marcus picked him up. He stopped talking about his weekends with enthusiasm. When I asked how things went, he'd shrug and say fine, without details. I asked Marcus if everything was okay. He assured me it was, that Oliver was just adjusting to having Sienna around more. Sienna had moved into his apartment in May, making the relationship official. I'd never met her, didn't want to. As long as she was good to Oliver, I didn't care who Marcus shared his life with. Except she wasn't good to Oliver, and I'd been too focused on my own life, my own healing, my own business success to see what was happening to my son. The nightmares started in September, 3 months ago. Oliver would wake up crying, calling for me, unable to articulate what scared him. I took him to our pediatrician, Dr. Reynolds, who said bad dreams were normal for kids his age, especially kids adjusting to divorced parents. The stomach aches started in October. Every Friday morning, like clockwork, Oliver would complain his tummy hurt. I'd take his temperature, check for other symptoms, find nothing. Dr. Reynolds suggested it might be anxiety, recommended I monitor the situation. The silence started in November. Oliver stopped talking about his father entirely. Wouldn't mention what they did together, who they saw, where they went. Just quiet, withdrawn, increasingly anxious every time a visit approached. Patricia had confronted me about it over coffee 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. Something's wrong with those visits, Vivian. You can see it. Oliver's not the same kid he was 6 months ago. He's adjusting to the new custody arrangement, I'd argued. It takes time. It's been over a year since the divorce. This isn't adjustment. This is deterioration. You need to investigate what's happening at Marcus's place. I can't just accuse Marcus of something without proof. It'll look like I'm being a vindictive ex-wife. So get proof, Patricia had said. Talk to Oliver. Really talk to him. Ask specific questions. Something is hurting that child, and you're the only one who can protect him. I'd promised I would. Then I'd gotten busy with year-end financial reports and client meetings and holiday planning, and I'd let it slide. Told myself I'd deal with it after the new year. Told myself Oliver just needed more time. Now it was January, and I'd found my son sobbing behind a garbage bin because his father told him he shouldn't have been born. I'd failed to protect him by being too reasonable, too civilized, too concerned about appearing like the bitter ex-wife. I'd prioritized my own discomfort over my child's safety. That ended today. Oliver fell asleep in the car on the way home from Patricia's office, exhausted from crying and the emotional weight of the afternoon. I carried him inside, all 48 pounds of him, and laid him on his bed without changing his clothes. He stirred slightly when I pulled his shoes off, but didn't wake up. I sat on the edge of his bed for a long moment, watching him sleep, his face finally peaceful after hours of devastation. My phone buzzed. Patricia. Emergency custody order filed and approved. Marcus will be served tomorrow at 9 a.m. Call me tonight after Oliver's asleep. I went downstairs to my home office and closed the door. For the first time all day, I was alone with my thoughts, and the full weight of what I'd discovered crashed over me. I sat at my desk and let myself cry. Not the controlled, dignified tears I'd allowed myself during the divorce. These were angry, frustrated, guilt-ridden sobs that came from somewhere deep in my chest. I had failed my son. For 6 months, I'd watched him deteriorate and convinced myself it was normal adjustment. I'd been so focused on being fair to Marcus, on not being the stereotypical vindictive ex-wife, that I'd ignored every maternal instinct screaming that something was wrong. After 20 minutes, I pulled myself together. Crying wasn't going to fix this. Action would fix this. I opened my laptop and created a new document titled Evidence. I started writing down everything Oliver had told me. Everything I'd observed over the past 6 months, every incident I'd dismissed as insignificant. The nightmares, the stomach aches, the growing anxiety, the silence about his visits. The pattern was obvious now that I was actually looking at it. Then I did something I probably should have done months ago. I called Margaret Chen at home. Margaret, it's Vivian Hartwell. I'm sorry to bother you in the evening, but I need to ask you something important about Oliver. Of course, Margaret said. I've been concerned since I saw you both this afternoon. What's going on? Has Oliver seemed different to you recently? Anxious, withdrawn, anything unusual? There was a pause. I was actually planning to call you next week about this. About 2 weeks ago, Oliver came to school with what looked like nail marks on his left forearm. When Mrs. Patterson asked him about it, he said he'd scratched himself playing. But the marks weren't consistent with self-inflicted scratches. They looked like someone had grabbed him. My hands tightened on the phone. Why wasn't I informed? Mrs. Patterson documented it and brought it to me. We were monitoring the situation, but without any other evidence or disclosure from Oliver, we couldn't make an official report. If we called CPS every time a child had a mysterious bruise, we'd be calling them daily. But I had planned to reach out to you if we saw anything else concerning. I'm filing for emergency sole custody, I said. Oliver told me today that his father and his father's girlfriend have been verbally abusing him for months, telling him he ruins their lives, that he shouldn't have been born. I need documentation of those marks on his arm. I have photographs, Margaret said immediately. Standard protocol when we see something questionable. I'll email them to you tonight, along with Mrs. Patterson's written report. Vivian, I'm so sorry. If I'd known the full context— You did what you were supposed to do, I interrupted. But I need those records for court. And if anyone from Marcus's legal team contacts the school, I need you to refer them directly to my attorney. Absolutely. I'll send everything within the hour. I hung up and added this information to my evidence document. Nail marks. Someone had grabbed my son hard enough to leave marks, and I hadn't even known about it. The rage that had been simmering all afternoon intensified into something cold and calculating. Marcus wasn't just being a neglectful father. This was active harm, and Sienna was right there enabling it, probably encouraging it. My phone rang. Patricia. I just got off the phone with Dr. Morrison, she said without preamble. Her report is devastating, Vivian. She's documenting clear signs of ongoing emotional abuse, anxiety disorder likely triggered by the visits with Marcus, and she's recommending supervised visitation only. But there's something else you need to know. What? I did some preliminary financial investigation into Marcus's current situation. He's in serious trouble. $340,000 in credit card debt across 7 cards, 2 of them in collections. The Manhattan apartment is in pre-foreclosure. He's 3 months behind on the mortgage. His real estate sales have dropped 80% in the last year. I absorbed this information. He never mentioned any financial problems during our custody discussions, because he's legally required to disclose material changes in his financial situation that might affect his ability to care for Oliver. Hiding this level of debt is a violation of your divorce agreement. And Vivian, there's more. I found email exchanges between Marcus and 4 different family law attorneys from the past 6 months. Why would he need multiple attorneys? Because he was shopping for one who would help him sue you for spousal support. He was building a case claiming you manipulated the divorce settlement, that you essentially stole the business from him, and that you owe him monthly support payments. He was planning to use Oliver as leverage, threatened to fight for primary custody unless you agreed to pay him. The room seemed to tilt. He was going to extort me using our son. That's exactly what he was planning. I found a draft email to one attorney where he explicitly states, "My ex-wife will pay anything to avoid a custody battle." He saw Oliver as a bargaining chip. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening street. How much did he want? $500,000 as a lump sum settlement, or $50,000 a year for 10 years. He calculated it based on the business valuation from the divorce. $500,000. To a man who had just told our 7-year-old son he wished he'd never been born. "Patricia, I want to destroy him," I said quietly. "Completely. I want him to lose everything." "Then we do this right," Patricia said. "We don't just win custody, we expose everything, the financial fraud, the abuse, the extortion plan. We make sure he can't hurt Oliver or try this again with anyone else. But it's going to get ugly, and you need to be prepared for that." "I'm prepared." "Good, because I'm going to hire a private investigator, full surveillance on Marcus and Sienna. If there's anything else happening that we don't know about, I want to find it before the custody hearing." "Do it," I said, "whatever it costs." We talked for another 30 minutes, mapping out strategy. Patricia would handle the legal assault. I would focus on protecting Oliver and documenting everything. The investigator would gather additional evidence. We had 3 weeks before the formal custody hearing. 3 weeks to build an airtight case. After hanging up with Patricia, I received the email from Margaret Chen. The photographs of Oliver's arm made my stomach turn. 4 distinct crescent-shaped marks on his left forearm, exactly the pattern fingernails would make if someone grabbed him tightly. The report from Mrs. Patterson noted that Oliver had flinched when she touched that arm, then quickly made up the story about scratching himself playing. I saved everything to a secure folder and backed it up to cloud storage. Then I made another call, this time to my business manager, Robert Chen. "Robert, I need you to do a complete audit of all our financials from 2019 to 2024. Every transaction, every client, every dollar that moved through the company while Marcus was still a partner. That's 5 years of records. Can I ask why?" "Marcus is claiming I defrauded him in the divorce settlement. I need proof that everything was legitimate, that every dollar I paid him was fair market value, and that there's no basis for him to claim I owe him anything." "I'll start first thing tomorrow," Robert said. "But Vivian, our books are clean. You know that. Marcus was barely involved in the actual financial management the last 2 years before the divorce. You were running everything." "Then the audit will prove that," I said. "I need documentation showing exactly what his contributions were versus mine, what the company was worth when we split, everything. You'll have it by end of week." I spent the next 2 hours going through old emails, text messages, anything that documented my relationship with Marcus over the past few years. I found the text thread from September where I'd asked Marcus if everything was okay with Oliver because he seemed anxious. Marcus had responded, "He's fine. Stop hovering. You're going to make him into a mama's boy." I found another exchange from October where I'd mentioned Oliver's stomach aches before visits. Marcus: "Kids get stomach aches. Don't project your issues with me onto our son." Every dismissal, every deflection, every time he'd made me doubt my own instincts about my child's well-being. I documented all of it. At 8:30, I heard movement upstairs. Oliver was awake. I went up to find him sitting on his bed, looking small and lost in his rumpled school clothes. "Hey, sleepyhead," I said gently. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," he said, "and hungry." "Let's get you some dinner. How about grilled cheese and tomato soup?" His favorite comfort meal. He nodded and followed me downstairs. While I made dinner, Oliver sat at the kitchen table quietly. I could see him working up courage to ask something, so I waited. "Mommy, what's going to happen with Daddy?" I brought him his plate and sat down across from him. "You're not going to have visits with Daddy for a little while, not until a judge makes sure it's safe for you. You'll still be able to see him, but there will be another adult there to make sure he treats you kindly." "He's going to be really mad," Oliver said, his voice small. "He might be," I acknowledged, "but that's not your problem to worry about. It's my job to keep you safe and happy, and that's what I'm doing. Daddy's feelings are his responsibility, not yours." "Sienna said if I ever told you anything bad about them, Daddy would stop loving me." The fork I was holding clattered onto my plate. "Sienna said that to you?" Oliver nodded, not looking at me. "Last month. When I accidentally broke one of her nail polish bottles. She got really mad and said if I tattled to you about anything that happens at Daddy's apartment, he would realize what a problem I was and stop wanting to see me at all." I had to breathe very carefully to stay calm. "Oliver, that's not true. Not any of it. First, breaking an accident is just that, an accident. Second, telling me when someone hurts you or scares you isn't tattling, it's being safe. And third, a parent's love should never be conditional on a child being silent about being hurt." I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recorder app. "Sweetheart, I need you to tell me exactly what Sienna said to you that day. Can you do that? I want to record it so I remember correctly." Oliver repeated the story in more detail. How he'd been in their bedroom looking for Marcus, saw the nail polish bottles on Sienna's vanity, reached to look at one, and knocked it over. How Sienna had screamed at him that he couldn't be trusted around nice things. How she'd grabbed his arm, the same arm that later had the marks Mrs. Patterson documented, and said, "Listen to me carefully. If you tell your mother about anything that happens here, your dad will finally see what a burden you are, and he'll stop pretending he wants you around." 7 years old, and a grown woman had terrorized him into silence about being abused. I saved the recording and added it to my evidence file. Over the next few days, a pattern emerged. The more comfortable Oliver felt, the more he revealed. Little things he'd been holding inside for months. How Sienna made him eat dinner in his room when her friends came over because kids at the dinner table ruin the atmosphere. How Marcus had yelled at him for crying when they were supposed to go to the science museum, but Marcus canceled last minute because Sienna wanted to go shopping instead. How Sienna told him he had his mother's annoying voice, and it gave her headaches. Each revelation made my blood boil hotter and my resolve stronger. The private investigator Patricia hired was a woman named Diana Torres, a former NYPD detective who now ran a small investigation firm specializing in family law cases. She met with me on Thursday afternoon at my office. "I've done preliminary surveillance on Marcus Hartwell and Sienna Valdez," Diana said, spreading photographs across my desk. "The financial situation is worse than your attorney described. Marcus is being sued by 2 former clients for breach of contract. He apparently took deposits for properties he never actually secured for them. There's also an outstanding judgment from an interior decorator he hired for a property flip that never sold. He owes her $42,000. So he's not just in debt, he's actively being sued for fraud? Looks that way. And Sienna Valdez is interesting. Her Instagram shows a luxury lifestyle, but the reality is different. She's living off a modest trust fund from her family, maybe $30,000 a year. The designer clothes and expensive dinners are mostly comped by brands or paid for by Marcus on credit cards that are all maxed out. She posts about their amazing life together, but I followed them for 3 days and they're barely scraping by. Diana showed me more photos. Marcus and Sienna arguing on a Manhattan street corner. Sienna looking stressed and angry outside a luxury boutique. Marcus's car, a leased BMW, with a parking boot on it from unpaid violations. The apartment is definitely going into foreclosure, Diana continued. I spoke with someone at the management company. Marcus hasn't paid his HOA fees in 4 months either. He's got maybe 6 weeks before he's evicted. Does Sienna know how bad it is? Based on their arguments I've witnessed, I'd say she's just finding out. I saw them fighting outside a restaurant last night. She was crying. He was defensive. Then she left in an Uber and he walked home alone. Looks like the relationship might be imploding. Good, I thought. Let them both suffer the consequences of their choices. There's one more thing, Diana said carefully. I reviewed Sienna's social media going back 2 years. She posts a lot about her relationship with Marcus, and there are several posts featuring Oliver. She showed me screenshots, photos of Oliver at Marcus's apartment, carefully posed and edited to look like happy family moments. Captions like, "Stepmom life," "Blessed the modern family." One photo from 3 months ago showed Oliver sitting on their couch, and the caption read, "Learning to love the little moments even when they're challenging / stepmom struggles." She's using him for content, I said flatly. She's exploiting my son for Instagram engagement while treating him like garbage in private. That would be my assessment, Diana agreed, and I've documented all of it. These posts can be used to show the discrepancy between her public persona and private behavior. Over the next week, more evidence accumulated. Dr. Morrison provided detailed psychological reports documenting Oliver's anxiety, his fear of disappointing his father, his internalized belief that he was a burden. Robert completed the financial audit proving that Marcus's buyout had been more than fair, that he'd actually received slightly more than his contribution warranted. Margaret Chen provided additional documentation from the school showing Oliver's behavioral changes over the past 6 months, increasing isolation from peers, declining participation in class. And through it all, Oliver bloomed. Without the stress of impending visits with Marcus, he was lighter, happier, more like the child he'd been a year ago. We established a new routine: therapy with Dr. Morrison twice a week, homework together at the kitchen table, bedtime stories, weekend trips to museums and parks. Simple things that let him be a kid again. On Friday, exactly 1 week after I'd found Oliver crying behind the garbage bin, Patricia called with news. Marcus is fighting the custody order. He's claiming you're making false allegations, that Oliver is being coached, that this is a vindictive attempt to alienate him from his son. Of course he is, I said. What else? His attorney is requesting an immediate hearing to restore visitation. We're going before Judge Brennan on Monday. Marcus will be there. This is when it starts getting ugly. Good, I said. I'm ready. That night, I sat Oliver down for a serious conversation. Baby, on Monday, I have to go to court to talk to a judge about the custody arrangement with Daddy. The judge might want to talk to you too, to hear your side of what's been happening. Would you be okay with that? Oliver's eyes widened with fear. Will Daddy be there? He'll be in the building, but not in the room when you talk to the judge. It'll just be you and the judge and maybe Dr. Morrison. What if I say something wrong? There's no wrong thing to say, I assured him. Just tell the truth about how you feel and what happened. That's all anyone wants from you. He thought about this for a long moment. Will it help make sure Daddy doesn't yell at me anymore? Yes, sweetheart. It will help make sure you're always safe. Okay, he said quietly. I can do it. I hugged him tight, this brave little boy who shouldn't have to do any of this. Sunday night, I barely slept. I lay awake running through everything in my mind. All the evidence, all the documentation, all the ways Marcus could try to fight back. Patricia had prepared me for every possibility. Marcus would claim I was alienating Oliver. He'd say the financial problems were temporary. He'd paint Sienna as a loving partner trying her best with a difficult stepchild situation. But we had the truth. We had Oliver's testimony, Dr. Morrison's expert opinion, documented evidence of abuse and neglect, proof of Marcus's financial deception and planned extortion. We had everything we needed. At 6 a.m. Monday morning, I got up and put on my armor. A charcoal gray suit from Brooks Brothers, my favorite pearl earrings that had been my mother's, subtle makeup, hair pulled back in a neat twist. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw a woman who was done being reasonable, done being accommodating, done prioritizing peace over protection. I saw a mother going to war for her child, and I was ready to win. The courthouse in Greenwich was an imposing brick building that always reminded me of old money and established power. I arrived at 8:30 with Patricia, both of us carrying briefcases full of evidence. Oliver was at home with Amanda, Patricia's assistant, who'd agreed to stay with him during the hearing. We'd explained to him that morning that the judge might want to talk to him later, but for now he should just try to have a normal day. We went through security and headed to the third-floor family court division. Marcus was already there in the waiting area outside Judge Brennan's courtroom, sitting with his attorney, a man I didn't recognize. Marcus looked terrible. He'd lost weight. His suit hung slightly loose on his frame, and there were dark circles under his eyes. When he saw me, his expression shifted from anxiety to anger. "Vivian," he said, standing up, "we need to talk." "No, we don't," I said calmly, not breaking stride toward the courtroom doors. "You're destroying me over one conversation Oliver overheard out of context," Marcus said, his voice rising. "This is insane. I'm his father. You can't just cut me out of his life because you're still bitter about the divorce." I stopped and turned to face him. Patricia put a hand on my arm, a gentle warning, but I shook it off. "One conversation?" I said, my voice deadly quiet. "Marcus, you told our 7-year-old son that you wish he was never born. You let your girlfriend terrorize him for months. You grabbed him hard enough to leave marks. You used him as a bargaining chip in your plan to extort money from me. This isn't about the divorce. This is about you being a terrible father." "I never grabbed him," Marcus said, "and I never plan to extort anyone. Whatever you think you know, I know everything," I interrupted. "Your debt, your lawsuits, your emails to attorneys, shopping for someone who'd help you sue me. I know about the foreclosure on your apartment and the clients suing you for fraud. I know exactly how desperate you are and exactly how willing you were to hurt Oliver to solve your problems." Marcus's face went pale. "You had me investigated?" "I protected my son," I said. "Something you should have been doing instead of making him believe he's a burden." "All rise," a bailiff called from inside the courtroom. "Family court is now in session, the Honorable Judge Martha Brennan presiding." We filed into the courtroom and took our places at opposite tables. Judge Brennan was a woman in her early 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She'd been a family court judge for 23 years, and Patricia had told me she had zero tolerance for parents who put their own interests above their children's welfare. "We're here for an emergency hearing regarding temporary custody modification in the matter of Hartwell versus Hartwell," Judge Brennan said. "I've reviewed the emergency petition and supporting documentation filed by Mrs. Vivian Hartwell. Mr. Marcus Hartwell is contesting the temporary custody order. Let's begin with opening statements." Marcus's attorney, a man who introduced himself as David Sterling, stood first. "Your Honor, my client is a devoted father who has been blindsided by these allegations. He maintains that the incident in question was a private conversation with his partner that was taken out of context by his 7-year-old son, who likely didn't understand what he was hearing. Mr. Hartwell has never physically harmed his child, has always maintained his custody schedule, and believes this petition is a vindictive attempt by his ex-wife to alienate him from his son due to ongoing resentment about their divorce." Patricia stood. "Your Honor, we have extensive documentation showing a pattern of emotional abuse spanning at least 6 months. This includes testimony from the child's psychologist, Dr. Ellen Morrison, photographs of physical marks on the child's arm from being grabbed, testimony from school officials about behavioral changes, and recorded statements from the child himself describing systematic psychological abuse by both his father and his father's girlfriend." This is not vindictive. This is protective. Judge Brennan nodded. I want to hear from Dr. Morrison first. Is she here? Dr. Morrison stood from the gallery seating behind us. Yes, Your Honor. Please take the stand. Dr. Morrison was sworn in and provided her testimony. She was professional, clear, and devastating. She explained Oliver's symptoms of anxiety, his fear of disappointing his father, his nightmares and psychosomatic stomach issues. She detailed the recorded conversation where Oliver described Sienna's threat to keep him silent. She gave her professional opinion that Oliver was suffering from ongoing emotional abuse and that unsupervised contact with his father was currently harmful to his psychological well-being. In your professional opinion, Dr. Morrison, is the child making these allegations up or being coached? Judge Brennan asked. Absolutely not, Dr. Morrison said firmly. I've been working with traumatized children for 18 years. Oliver's distress is genuine, his accounts are consistent and detailed, and his symptoms align perfectly with a child experiencing emotional abuse. He's not being coached. He's being honest about what he's experienced. Marcus's attorney cross-examined her, trying to suggest that Oliver might have misunderstood adult conversations, but Dr. Morrison shut it down expertly. Children. Oliver's age might not understand nuance, she explained, but they absolutely understand when they're being told they shouldn't exist. Next, Patricia presented the school documentation. Margaret Chen had provided written testimony about the marks on Oliver's arm and his behavioral changes. Mrs. Patterson's reports showed Oliver withdrawing from classroom participation, becoming isolated from peers, exhibiting signs of anxiety. Then Patricia dropped the bomb that even I hadn't been expecting. Your Honor, we'd like to call Sienna Valdez to testify. I turned to Patricia in shock. She gave me a small nod. In the gallery behind Marcus, I saw a familiar figure stand up. Sienna Valdez, but not the Instagram perfect version. She wore a simple black dress, minimal makeup, her hair pulled back in a plain ponytail. She looked nervous and determined. Marcus stood up. What is she doing here? Sit down, Mr. Hartwell, Judge Brennan said sharply. Sienna took the stand and was sworn in. She didn't look at Marcus once. Ms. Valdez, you are currently in a relationship with Mr. Marcus Hartwell, correct? Patricia asked. I was, Sienna said, her voice steady. We broke up 4 days ago. A murmur went through the courtroom. Marcus looked like he'd been punched. Can you tell the court why you agreed to testify today? Sienna took a deep breath. Because I've been complicit in hurting a child, and I can't live with that anymore. Everything Mrs. Hartwell has alleged is true. I saw Marcus tell Oliver he wished he'd never been born. I told Oliver that talking to his mother about our household would make his father stop loving him. I grabbed him hard enough to leave marks when he broke my nail polish. I treated that little boy like he was an inconvenience instead of a person, and I'm here to make sure the truth comes out so he can be protected. The courtroom went completely silent. Ms. Valdez, do you have any evidence to support these statements? Judge Brennan asked. I have recordings, Sienna said. Video recordings on my phone of Marcus yelling at Oliver, calling him names, telling him he ruins everything. I have text messages where Marcus told me he was planning to use Oliver to force Mrs. Hartwell to pay him money. I have everything, and I'm willing to provide all of it. Patricia walked to the stand and handed Sienna a tablet. Is this the video file you provided to our office last Friday? Yes. Your Honor, we'd like to play a portion of this recording. Judge Brennan nodded, her expression grim. The video played on the courtroom's screen. It was dated 3 weeks earlier. Marcus and Oliver were in the living room of the Manhattan apartment. Oliver had apparently spilled something on the carpet. Marcus's voice, clear and unmistakable. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't do anything without making a mess. You know how much this carpet cost? Of course you don't, because you're 7 and you don't think about anyone but yourself. Just like you didn't think about how having you would completely derail my life. Oliver's small voice. I'm sorry, Daddy. I didn't mean to. You never mean to, but you always do. You always ruin things. The video stopped. My hands were shaking. Seeing it, hearing Marcus talk to our son that way, was worse than any description could have been. Judge Brennan's face was like stone. Mr. Hartwell, do you have anything to say? Marcus stood, his face red, his voice defensive. That was taken out of context. I was having a bad day. I was stressed about money. I didn't mean... You didn't mean to tell your child he derailed your life? Judge Brennan said coldly. You didn't mean for him to hear that he ruins things? Mr. Hartwell, I don't care what kind of day you were having. There is no context that makes speaking to a 7-year-old child that way acceptable. She looked at her notes, then at me. Mrs. Hartwell, I'd like to speak with Oliver. Is he available? Yes, Your Honor. He's with my assistant nearby. I can have him brought here within 20 minutes. Please do so. We'll take a brief recess. As the bailiff called the recess, I looked across the courtroom at Marcus. He was staring at Sienna with an expression of absolute betrayal. She met his gaze steadily, without flinching. She'd destroyed him. The woman who'd been his partner in abusing my son had become the key witness, ensuring he'd lose everything. And I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. I called Amanda and asked her to bring Oliver to the courthouse. Patricia and I waited in a small conference room while Marcus and his attorney huddled in another. Through the window in the door, I could see Marcus pacing, his face red, gesturing angrily while David Sterling tried to calm him down. Sienna contacted me last Wednesday, Patricia said quietly. The night after Marcus confessed about his financial situation and she found the emails about his extortion plan. She was devastated. Said she'd been manipulated into thinking Marcus was this successful, stable man when the reality was he'd been lying to her for years. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wasn't sure she'd actually go through with testifying until she walked into that courtroom. People change their minds. They get scared. They convince themselves to protect the person they loved. But she showed up, and her testimony is destroying Marcus's credibility. Amanda arrived with Oliver 25 minutes later. My son looked small and nervous in his navy sweater and khaki pants. I knelt down and hugged him. How are you feeling, sweetheart? Scared, he admitted. Is Daddy here? He is, but you won't have to see him. You're just going to talk to the judge in her office. Dr. Morrison will be there with you too. Just tell the truth about how you feel, okay? Oliver nodded, clinging to my hand. Judge Brennan's clerk came to get us. The judge will see Oliver now in chambers. Mrs. Hartwell, you and Mr. Hartwell may wait in the courtroom, but you cannot be present during the interview. I walked Oliver to the door of Judge Brennan's chambers. Dr. Morrison was already there, giving Oliver an encouraging smile. I kissed the top of his head and watched him walk inside, his small hand reaching for Dr. Morrison's. The wait was excruciating. Marcus and I sat on opposite sides of the courtroom, not speaking, not looking at each other. His attorney kept checking his phone. Patricia reviewed her notes. I just sat there, hands folded in my lap, trying not to imagine what Oliver was saying. 35 minutes later, the door to chambers opened. Dr. Morrison emerged first, her expression carefully neutral. Then Oliver, looking tired but calmer. Then Judge Brennan. We're ready to reconvene, she said. Everyone took their positions. Oliver sat in the front row of the gallery with Dr. Morrison. I wanted to go to him, but Patricia touched my arm, keeping me in my seat. Judge Brennan looked at both attorneys. I've had a very enlightening conversation with Oliver Hartwell. That child is remarkably articulate and emotionally aware for his age. He was able to clearly describe his experiences over the past 6 months, his feelings about his father and Ms. Valdez, and his fears about future visits. She opened a folder on her bench. Mr. Hartwell, your son told me that he loves you very much, but that he's afraid of making you angry. He described multiple incidents of verbal abuse that align exactly with Ms. Valdez's testimony and Dr. Morrison's professional assessment. He told me about being grabbed hard enough to hurt, about being made to eat meals alone in his room when guests were present, about hearing you and Ms. Valdez discuss how much easier your lives would be without him. Marcus started to speak, but Judge Brennan held up her hand. I'm not finished. Oliver also told me something that I find particularly disturbing. He said that he's been trying very hard to be good so that you wouldn't stop loving him completely. He's been making himself smaller, quieter, less troublesome because he believes his existence is a burden to you. Mr. Hartwell, your 7-year-old son has internalized the belief that he doesn't deserve to take up space in the world. Do you understand how profoundly damaging that is? Marcus's face crumpled. I never wanted him to feel that way. I was just frustrated, stressed about money. I said things I didn't mean. You said them repeatedly, Judge Brennan interrupted. Over months, in front of a child who trusted you to love him unconditionally. Mr. Sterling, does your client have anything substantive to offer in his defense? Any evidence that contradicts what we've heard today? David Sterling stood. Your Honor, Mr. Hartwell acknowledges that he's made mistakes. He's under tremendous financial stress, his business is struggling, and he admits that stress has affected his patience with his son. But he loves Oliver deeply and wants the opportunity to repair their relationship. He's willing to attend counseling, anger management, whatever the court requires. What about the plan to use Oliver as leverage to extort money from Mrs. Hartwell? Judge Brennan asked. How do you explain those emails? Marcus stood up without waiting for his attorney. Your Honor, I was desperate. I built that company with Vivian, and when we divorced, I took a buyout that I thought was fair, but it wasn't enough. I've made bad investments. I'm in debt, and I was looking for any way to fix my financial situation. I never actually went through with contacting Vivian about it. It was just an idea I was exploring. An idea that involved threatening to take her child away unless she paid you $500,000, Judge Brennan said flatly. Mr. Hartwell, that's not desperation. That's extortion, and it demonstrates exactly how willing you are to use your son as a tool to get what you want. She looked down at her notes again, then directly at Marcus. Here's what's going to happen. The temporary emergency custody order granting Mrs. Hartwell sole physical and legal custody is hereby made permanent pending a full custody hearing scheduled for 3 weeks from today. Until that hearing, Mr. Hartwell, your visitation with Oliver is suspended entirely. Your Honor, please, Marcus started. I'm not finished, Judge Brennan said sharply. You will undergo a complete psychological evaluation by a court-appointed psychologist within the next 2 weeks. You will enroll in and complete a parenting class focused on emotional health and child development. You will attend individual therapy weekly. Once these requirements are met, and only if the psychologist's evaluation determines you're not a danger to Oliver's emotional well-being, we will discuss supervised visitation. She turned to me. Mrs. Hartwell, I'm also ordering that Oliver continue his therapy with Dr. Morrison twice weekly at Mr. Hartwell's expense. Dr. Morrison will provide monthly reports to the court on Oliver's progress. Yes, Your Honor, I said. Now, regarding the financial matters. Judge Brennan's expression hardened. Mr. Hartwell, you violated the terms of your divorce decree by failing to disclose material changes to your financial situation. Mrs. Hartwell was entitled to that information given the shared custody arrangement. Your failure to provide it suggests either negligence or intentional deception. Which is it? Marcus's attorney stood. Your Honor, my client was trying to resolve his financial difficulties privately without involving. He was hiding $340,000 in debt while sharing custody of a minor child, Judge Brennan interrupted. That's relevant information. What if there had been an emergency with Oliver while he was in Mr. Hartwell's care? What if medical decisions needed to be made? Mrs. Hartwell had a right to know that the father of her child was in financial crisis. She made notes on her paperwork. I'm ordering Mr. Hartwell to provide complete financial disclosure to Mrs. Hartwell's attorney within 7 business days. Every account, every debt, every asset, full transparency. Additionally, I'm ordering him to pay child support in the amount of $15,000 per month, retroactive to the date the emergency custody petition was filed. Marcus went white. Your Honor, I can't afford $15,000 a month. I'm barely keeping my head above water as it is. Then I suggest you figure it out, Judge Brennan said coldly. You were willing to demand $500,000 from your ex-wife. You can certainly contribute appropriately to the care of your own child. If you fail to make payments, Mrs. Hartwell can pursue wage garnishment or other collection methods. David Sterling tried again. Your Honor, with all respect, my client is facing foreclosure on his residence. $15,000 a month will make it impossible for him to. Your client's housing situation is not this court's concern, Judge Brennan said. His child's welfare is. The amount is set based on the standard calculation given Mrs. Hartwell's income and expenses for Oliver's care. Mr. Hartwell should have considered the financial implications of fatherhood before he chose to have a child. The irony of that statement, given what Marcus had said to Oliver, was not lost on anyone in the courtroom. Judge Brennan continued. I'm also issuing a restraining order. Mr. Hartwell, you are not to contact Oliver directly in any way. No calls, no texts, no emails, no showing up at his school or Mrs. Hartwell's residence. All communication regarding Oliver must go through Mrs. Hartwell's attorney. Violation of this order will result in immediate legal consequences, including possible criminal charges. Marcus sank into his chair, his face buried in his hands. Ms. Valdez, Judge Brennan said, turning to Sienna, who was still sitting in the witness stand. Thank you for your testimony today. I recognize that it took courage to come forward, even if you should have done so sooner. I hope you've learned something about the responsibility adults have toward children. I have, Your Honor, Sienna said quietly. I'm deeply sorry for my part in hurting Oliver. Tell that to Oliver, not to me, Judge Brennan said, though I suspect the damage you've done will take years for him to fully recover from. She gathered her papers. We'll reconvene in 3 weeks for the formal custody hearing. At that time, I'll review Mr. Hartwell's progress on the court-ordered requirements and determine long-term custody arrangements. This hearing is adjourned. The bailiff called for everyone to rise as Judge Brennan left the bench. The moment she was gone, Marcus stood up and turned toward me, his face twisted with anger. You did this, he said, his voice shaking. You turned my own girlfriend against me. You dug into my private finances. You poisoned my son against me, all because you couldn't handle that I moved on with my life. I stood to face him, completely calm. I protected my son from you. That's all I did. Everything else, all the debt, all the lies, all the cruelty, that was you. You did this to yourself. I'll appeal this, Marcus said. I'll fight you on every single point. I'll drag this out for years if I have to. With what money? I asked quietly. You're broke, Marcus. You're facing foreclosure and lawsuits, and now $15,000 a month in child support you can't pay. You have no leverage, no resources, and no credibility. You're done. Patricia stepped between us. Mr. Hartwell, any further communication needs to go through me. Mrs. Hartwell, we should go. I turned away from Marcus and walked to where Oliver sat with Dr. Morrison. My son looked up at me with those green eyes, and I saw something in them that had been missing for months. Hope. Can we go home, Mommy? Yes, sweetheart. We can go home. I took his hand, and we walked out of the courtroom together. Behind us, I heard Marcus's voice raised in anger, arguing with his attorney. I didn't look back. In the courthouse lobby, Sienna was waiting near the exit. She looked at me nervously. Mrs. Hartwell, can I talk to you for just a minute? I considered refusing, but something in her expression made me pause. Oliver, go wait with Aunt Patricia by the door, okay? Oliver went to Patricia, and I faced Sienna. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, she said. I know what I did was unforgivable. I treated your son horribly because I was selfish and immature, and I wanted Marcus all to myself. I told myself that Oliver was just being difficult, that kids exaggerate, that he'd adjust. I didn't want to see what was really happening. You terrorized a 7-year-old child, I said flatly. You threatened him into silence about being abused. Why should I care that you feel bad about it now? You shouldn't, Sienna said. But I want you to know that I meant what I said in there. I'm done being that person. I'm done hurting people for my own convenience. And I'm going to do whatever I can to help make sure Oliver is protected. You already did that by testifying, I said. That's all I need from you. There's more, Sienna said. Marcus has been talking to some of his clients, trying to get them to write character references for him, letters saying what a great father he is. I have copies of the emails where he's coaching them on what to say. I can send those to your attorney. I studied her face. She looked sincere, but I'd learned not to trust appearances. Why are you doing this? I asked. You loved him. Why destroy him so completely? Sienna's eyes filled with tears. Because when I found out the truth about Marcus, about the debt and the lies and the plan to use Oliver as extortion, I realized I'd been in love with a person who didn't exist. The real Marcus is a man who would hurt his own child to solve his problems. And I can't love that man. I won't protect that man. Maybe testifying against him doesn't make up for what I did to Oliver, but it's all I can offer. I nodded slowly. Send the emails to Patricia. And Sienna? Get therapy. Figure out why you were willing to hurt a child for a man you barely knew. Make sure you never do this again. I will, she said. Thank you for even talking to me. I walked away from her and joined Patricia and Oliver at the exit. We stepped out into cold, January sunshine. Oliver squeezed my hand. Did we win, Mommy? I looked down at him, this brave, resilient child who'd survived months of abuse and still had the courage to tell the truth. Yes, baby. We won. Patricia drove us back to Greenwich. Oliver fell asleep in the back seat almost immediately, exhausted from the emotional toll of the day. Patricia glanced at me. You did it. Full custody, supervised visitation only, financial disclosure, child support, restraining order. Marcus got destroyed in there. Good, I said. He deserved every bit of it. What are you going to do now? I looked back at Oliver, sleeping peacefully. I'm going to take care of my son. Make sure he heals from this. Make sure he knows he's loved unconditionally, that he's wanted, that he makes my life better, not worse. And Marcus? Marcus is going to learn what it feels like to lose everything because of his own choices, I said. His business, his relationship, his home, his son. All of it gone because he couldn't see past his own ego and desperation. That's not revenge. That's justice. Patricia smiled. Remind me never to make you angry. I smiled back, but there was no humor in it. Just remind people not to hurt my child. That's all it takes to stay on my good side. When we got home, Oliver woke up and I carried him inside. I made him hot chocolate and grilled cheese, his favorite comfort food, and we sat at the kitchen table together. Mommy, do I have to see Daddy again? He asked quietly. Not unless you want to, I said, and not until the judge is absolutely sure it's safe for you. And even then, there will always be another adult there to make sure he treats you right. What if I never want to see him? The question broke my heart. That's your choice, sweetheart. I won't force you, but someday, when you're older, you might change your mind, or you might not. Either way is okay. Oliver nodded, processing this. I'm glad I told you the truth, even though it was scary. I'm glad too, I said. You were so brave today. I'm so proud of you. That night, after Oliver was asleep, I sat in my home office and opened my laptop. I started drafting something I'd been thinking about for days. A proposal for a foundation focused on supporting mothers in custody battles involving emotional abuse. Legal funding, psychological resources, education about recognizing the signs. Everything I wished I'd had 6 months ago when I first started noticing Oliver's changes. I'd turn my pain into purpose, I'd make sure other mothers didn't make my mistakes. I'd help other children like Oliver get the protection they deserved. Marcus had broken my son's heart. But in doing so, he'd awakened something fierce and unbreakable in me. And I was going to use that power to make sure children everywhere were protected from parents who saw them as burdens instead of blessings. The war wasn't over. The formal custody hearing was still 3 weeks away. But the battle was won, and I was just getting started. 3 months passed before I truly understood what we'd survived. The formal custody hearing happened exactly as scheduled, 3 weeks after that devastating day in Judge Brennan's courtroom. Marcus showed up with a new attorney, a cheaper one since David Sterling had apparently dropped him as a client. He'd completed the psychological evaluation, though the results were damning. The court-appointed psychologist found narcissistic tendencies, poor emotional regulation, and an inability to prioritize Oliver's needs over his own ego. Marcus had attended exactly 2 parenting classes and 1 therapy session before the hearing. Judge Brennan made the temporary custody order permanent. Full legal and physical custody to me. Marcus was granted supervised visitation once a week for 2 hours at a family court visitation center, contingent on him completing anger management and continuing therapy. He'd attended the first 3 sessions with Oliver. They were awkward and stilted, with a social worker sitting in the room taking notes. Marcus tried to apologize during the second visit, but it came out defensive and self-serving. Oliver was polite, but distant, treating his father like a stranger he was being forced to be nice to. The child support payments never materialized. Marcus's Manhattan apartment went into foreclosure in February. He'd moved to a studio in Queens, working for a small real estate agency, handling rentals instead of luxury sales. Patricia initiated wage garnishment proceedings to collect the court-ordered support. We received the first payment of $15,000 in late March, automatically deducted from Marcus's paycheck. It would take years for him to pay what he owed, but at least it was something. Sienna disappeared from our lives completely. She'd sent the emails she promised to Patricia, showing Marcus coaching his former clients on writing character references. Those emails had helped destroy any remaining credibility he had. Last I heard, she'd moved to San Francisco and was dating a tech entrepreneur. I saw her Instagram once, full of carefully curated photos of her new perfect life. I didn't follow her, didn't care what she was doing. She'd given us what we needed, and that was enough. Oliver bloomed in ways I hadn't thought possible. Therapy with Dr. Morrison twice a week helped him process the trauma, understand that none of it was his fault, learn healthy ways to express his feelings. The nightmares stopped completely by March. The stomach aches disappeared. He rejoined his school friends, started participating enthusiastically in class again. Mrs. Patterson told me at parent-teacher conferences that he seemed like a completely different child, happy and engaged and confident. One Saturday in April, 3 months after the courthouse confrontation, Oliver and I were building a Lego castle at the kitchen table when he said something that made me stop. "Mommy, I don't think Daddy knows how to love people the right way." I set down the Lego piece I was holding and looked at him. "What makes you say that?" "Dr. Morrison says that love is supposed to make you feel safe and happy and like you can be yourself. But when I was with Daddy, I felt like I had to be really, really small and quiet so he wouldn't get mad. That's not what love is supposed to feel like. 7 years old and already so wise. You're absolutely right, sweetheart. Love should never make you feel like you have to disappear." "Do you think Daddy will ever learn?" Oliver asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Some people do change when they realize what they've lost. Some people don't. But that's not your responsibility to worry about. Your job is just to be a kid and be happy." "I am happy now," Oliver said, and went back to building his castle. That same week, I officially launched the foundation I'd been working on, the Oliver Foundation, named after my son, who gave me permission to use his name if it could help other kids. We focused on providing legal support for parents, fighting custody battles involving emotional abuse, funding for child therapy, and educational resources about recognizing the signs of psychological harm in children. Patricia served as legal director. Dr. Morrison joined our advisory board. We secured initial funding of $200,000 from my own savings and started taking cases. Our first client was a woman named Jennifer Martinez, 42 years old, whose ex-husband had been systematically undermining her relationship with their 9-year-old daughter. He told the daughter that Jennifer didn't really love her, that she was too busy with work to care, that he was the only parent who really wanted her. The daughter was showing the same signs Oliver had shown: anxiety, withdrawal, internalized worthlessness. We took the case, provided Jennifer with a top family law attorney, got the daughter into therapy, and built a case for custody modification. It felt like justice. Not just for Jennifer and her daughter, but for Oliver and me. Turning our pain into protection for others. By May, we'd helped 17 families. Some cases we won completely, securing full custody for the protective parent. Some we negotiated to supervise visitation like Marcus had. One we lost and that hurt, but we learned from it and adjusted our strategies. Every child we helped felt like a piece of healing for Oliver. Marcus attended his supervised visits sporadically. He showed up for the session in late February, missed the one in early March, came to 2 in a row mid-March, then missed 3 straight in April. Oliver stopped asking about him. When the visits did happen, Oliver was cordial, but emotionally detached. He'd answer Marcus's questions politely, show him schoolwork when asked, but there was no warmth there, no connection, just a child going through the motions with a man who happened to be his father. I didn't force anything. If Oliver wanted a relationship with Marcus someday, that would be his choice. If he didn't, that was fine too. My job was to keep him safe and let him heal at his own pace. In late May, I got an unexpected call from Marcus. He'd never called me directly since the restraining order. All communication went through Patricia. But my phone rang at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday, and his name appeared on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Marcus. Vivian. His voice sounded tired, older somehow. I know I'm not supposed to contact you directly, but I needed to say something and I didn't want it filtered through attorneys. You have 2 minutes. I'm sorry. The words came out quickly, like he'd been practicing them. I'm sorry for what I said to Oliver, for how I treated him, for letting Sienna hurt him. I'm sorry for planning to use him to get money from you. I'm sorry for being a terrible father and an even worse person. I waited. There had to be more. I've been in therapy twice a week since the hearing. Real therapy, not just showing up to check a box. And I'm starting to understand how badly I screwed up, how much damage I did, not just to Oliver, but to you, to myself, to everything. He paused. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect you to believe me. But I needed you to know that I'm trying to become someone different than the man who hurt our son. Are you calling because you want something from me? I asked. Or because you genuinely feel remorse? Both, maybe, Marcus admitted. I feel remorse. Real, genuine, crushing remorse every time I think about Oliver's face when he told that judge he was trying to be good enough for me to love him. But I also want you to know that I'm changing, because I hope someday, even if it's years from now, Oliver might give me another chance to be his father, the right way this time. I considered his words carefully. Marcus, whether Oliver ever wants a relationship with you is entirely his decision. I won't encourage it or discourage it. But I'll tell you this, if you're serious about changing, do it for yourself, not for Oliver, not for me, not for any external reward. Do it because you recognize that the person you were was unacceptable and you refuse to be that person anymore. I'm trying, he said quietly. I've lost everything. The apartment, the business reputation, Sienna, my son. I'm 47 years old, living in a studio apartment, working a job I'm overqualified for, and drowning in debt. But the worst part isn't any of that. The worst part is knowing I did this to myself by being cruel to a child who deserved better. Then be better, I said. Not for any reward or relationship or redemption. Just be better because it's the right thing to do. I will, Marcus said. Thank you for listening. He hung up. I sat there holding my phone, processing the conversation. I didn't know if Marcus would actually change. People said they'd change all the time and then slipped back into old patterns. But for the first time, I heard something in his voice I'd never heard before. Genuine humility, real accountability. Maybe he'd follow through. Maybe he wouldn't. Either way, Oliver and I would be fine. That night, I went upstairs and found Oliver already asleep, curled up with the stuffed dinosaur he'd had since he was 3. I sat on the edge of his bed and brushed the hair from his forehead. He stirred slightly, but didn't wake. My beautiful, brave, resilient boy. He'd survived something no child should have to survive, and he was thriving anyway. He laughed freely now, played without anxiety, talked about his feelings openly. He had friends, hobbies, dreams about becoming a paleontologist or maybe a video game designer. He was 7 years old and already stronger than most adults I knew. I kissed his forehead and whispered, "You were always meant to be born. You make my life infinitely better, and I will never let anyone make you feel otherwise ever again." 3 months ago, I'd found my son crying behind a garbage bin, destroyed by his father's cruelty. Today, he was building Lego castles and helping other kids through the foundation bearing his name. We'd gone through hell and come out the other side. Marcus was right about one thing. He'd lost everything. His apartment, his reputation, his relationship, his son's trust. All of it gone because he'd chosen cruelty over kindness, ego over empathy. And I'd gained everything that mattered. My son's safety, his happiness, his future, the knowledge that I'd fought for him when it counted, the satisfaction of turning our trauma into purpose through the foundation. Marcus said he'd regret every word. He was right, and I'd never regret a single action I took to protect my child. That's what being a mother means. Not being perfect, not being civil or diplomatic when those things compromise your child's welfare. It means being fierce when necessary, being strategic when required, and being absolutely unwavering in protecting the people you love. I'd learned that lesson the hard way. But I'd learned it well, and Oliver would grow up knowing that he was wanted, loved, and worth fighting for. That was all that mattered.